we just got a ton of new casting announcements for Superman Legacy, the first film of James Gunn's DC universe. And it's got some excellent choices and some questionable inclusions. But ultimately, I think we have something really special ahead of us. So let's start right at the top of the card. No reason to beat around the bush. David Corenswet has been cast to play Superman, the Man of Steel himself. And I think this is an excellent choice. This is really great. He's a relative unknown. You might know him from either Pearl, The Politician, or Hollywood, the last two of which you can find on Netflix, and I highly recommend you watch them. They're very good. But he is a relative unknown, and I think that really helps in this instance, because if this is supposed to be Superman's sort of coming out party, so to speak, like, he's apparently been Superman for a little while, but this is him like really stepping onto the main stage, from what I understand from what James Gunn has said. And I think that story works better if the audience doesn't immediately recognize the actor playing him, right? Like, if that's Tom Cruise or something, then you immediately go like, that's the guy, right? But if it's somebody you haven't really seen before, I think that sort of illusion works better. So I think this is a really great choice. He was actually my personal pick for my DCU rewrites. He was the person that I had cast for my Superman. So I might have to change that now just for the sake of being different. But it just, I mean, it goes to show that I really do have the utmost faith in this guy's ability to perform this role. Because he, first of all, absolutely looks the part, right? There's no argument about that. I mean, he's incredibly handsome. Look at his dimples. He does look like Henry Cavill, which has been a complaint that I've heard thrown around, but both him and Henry Cavill also look a lot like Superman. So, like, I don't know, if you're casting for people to look like Superman, you're going to end up casting people who kind of look similar. So I don't know. I don't really understand that complaint, but whatever. When you watch interviews of him, he's immediately charismatic. He's relatable. He's lovable. He's just like, he seems like this really great guy. And I think that's perfect. Like, you should cast somebody to play Superman who is already kind of like Superman in their normal life, because it is such an important role to this universe. So you want them to be sort of an ambassador for that role, even in their real life. So you can't cast somebody who's like problematic, right? And I think David Corenswet 100% fits that bill. He's an amazing actor. I know like I said, he is a relative unknown, but in preparation for talking about the actors in this video, I went and I did some research because I wasn't familiar with a lot of them. And I went and I watched a bunch of their previous work. And one of the things that I watched was Hollywood, which he plays the star of, Jack Costello. And he's absolutely amazing. There's a couple of scenes that immediately stand out. I'm probably not going to put clips in because I don't want to get like copyright strikes or anything. But I highly recommend that you go watch Hollywood. It's really good. And I think once you get even just like 3 episodes in, you'll know that this is the right choice for Superman. So I'm really excited about it. I think this is absolutely perfect. All right, next up we've got Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. And again, I think this is excellent, right? So you may know Rachel Brosnahan from either Marvelous Miss Maisel or Manhattan, the television series. I, again, as part of looking into who these people are, started watching Miss Maisel. I didn't watch the whole thing. It's like 5 seasons. But she's great in it. It's really funny. Honestly, she plays a character who is pretty similar to Lois Lane. And when you watch interviews of Brosnahan, she still has a lot of that same personality. Like, it seems like that's just, again, kind of who she is. She is a lot like Lois Lane. I don't need to explain who Lois Lane is, do I? I assume most people know, like, who she is. She's the star reporter of the Daily Planet. She's a really powerful, like, strong woman. She doesn't take no for an answer. She always chases her story. Like, she's very much that character. You all know this. I don't need to tell you this. But I think this is amazing casting. I don't really have a ton to say about it because it's literally just like you picked a person who is already in their normal life, very much like Lois Lane, which feels like an obvious choice. But an obvious choice is also a good choice, right? I think that she will play this role really well. Apparently, they've done screen tests between her and David Corenswet Superman, which I think is really great because these are two characters that obviously have to have a lot of chemistry. And James Gunn did screen tests also for Guardians, which is actually the only reason why we had Chris Pratt play Star-Lord. The studio didn't want him to play that role at all, but it was in those screen tests that James Gunn was able to prove to them, like, he works really well with the rest of this cast. And so if they're using that same sort of thought process here, because I think we can all agree that the Guardians casting is amazing. Like, that's one of the best casts in the MCU. And so if they're using that same sort of strategy here, then I have the utmost faith that these two people will be great together. So I have a lot of faith in that. I'm really excited about it. You know, will they give her purple eyes? In the comic books, she famously has purple eyes, which is very unique to her. They don't usually bother doing that in most adaptations, and hell, they don't even all the time do it in the comic books. But it is something I always look for. So if James Gunn is a true comic book fan, he will give Rachel Brosnahan purple eyes. But even if he doesn't, I know that she'll do an absolutely amazing job. So again, I'm really excited about this. And weirdly, even though we have a lot of other castings to get through, that sort of does it for casting of characters who I would have expected to be in Superman Legacy, right? Superman Lois must have, right? But I was expecting that the other castings that we would hear about would be like a Lex Luthor, a Martha and Jonathan Kent, a Perry White, a Jimmy Olsen. Although we do have rumors that Skylar Gisondo might be playing Jimmy Olsen, which would be great. I think he would be excellent at the role. It is just a rumor right now, so I won't get into that too much. But I think he would be really good at it, obviously. But every other casting that we have for this movie are people who I was not expecting at all. For example, the next one that I have here on my list is that Nathan Fillion is going to be playing Guy Gardner. Now, I'm assuming most people probably know who Nathan Fillion is. He's relatively famous. He's not like an A-lister, but I think in like the nerd community, he's a big deal. So I assume that everyone watching this probably knows and loves him. But he's from Firefly Castle. I think he's on The Rookie is the name of his cop show right now. You might know him as Buck from Halo, or honestly as Hal Jordan, because he voices Hal Jordan in all kinds of stuff. So he does have a history of being a Green Lantern. But in this one, he's playing Guy Gardner, who, if you don't know, he is the second Green Lantern, third if you count Alan Scott, who was the Green Lantern, but wasn't part of like the Green Lantern Corps. So depending on how you count that, Guy is either the second or the third. But Guy Gardner, he comes from like a police family with a really abusive father who's just a real piece of shit. Which causes Guy Gardner to sort of become a delinquent, and eventually, basically he's just like a loose cannon. He tends to be kind of rude, but ultimately like a good man, you know? And he is my least favorite Green Lantern, so I don't have a ton to say about him positive, because I just really don't care for Guy Gardner. Because most of the time that he shows up, I feel like he just shows up to like do something stupid and then like flip someone off or something. Like, that's, I don't know. It's not that he's a bad character. It's that I think he gets misused a lot, if that makes sense. But I don't know. This brings into a lot of questions, right? So like Nathan Fillion is playing Guy Gardner, and Nathan Fillion is significantly older than either David Cornsweet or Rachel Brosnahan or the other people that we know are cast in this, right? Because they're both in like their early 30s. I think Rachel's 33 and David's, I think, just turned 30, but Nathan Fillion's 52. So he's significantly older, which on one hand makes a lot of sense, because in the comics, Guy Gardner was present for a lot of like the really big old stories, right? Like, he's there for Death of Superman, he's there for Infinite Crisis. Like, he is a legacy character, so it makes sense for him to be like one who has existed for a long time, because literally he has existed for a long time. But he's typically younger than Hal Jordan, and I think also John Stewart. I'd have to check on that, but I think he's usually younger than John as well. And so the question is like, how old does that make them? Because we know we're getting the Lanterns show that's going to star Hal and John. So it's like, how old are they going to be? Are they going to make John like the new guy? Which it could work. We'll get into a little bit more of why I think he'll probably end up being the youngest of them later when we talk about a certain other casting for a potential love interest of his. But yeah, it definitely brings up a lot of questions of like, where exactly in the timeline this world is going to be. It's starting to get a little confusing on that front, and I don't necessarily love that. But it's also like, what does this mean for the Green Lantern Corps? Because we already know that Hal and John exist, like I said. And so now if there's this third human Green Lantern, what does that mean for sort of the development of the Green Lantern Corps storyline? Like, what's the situation with Sinestro? Has he already become a Yellow Lantern? Guy Gardner famously falls to the Red Lanterns multiple times. And so, like, are we going to see that? Has that already happened? Because he's 52. So, like, has that already happened at some point? Are we going to see characters like Bleez or Atrocitus or Dexstar, right? It brings up a lot of questions. In the Earth 1 art, now that I think about it, in the promo art that they used for the Lantern show when James Gunn was like showing off his new slate, they used Green Lantern Earth 1 art, and in that one, John Stewart is a Yellow Lantern. So I don't know if that means anything. But I don't know. Basically, it's added a lot of confusion to this. And while I do know that Nathan Fillion is going to do really well in this role, because I love him and he's played Green Lanterns before, so I know he's going to do fine, this does make me very confused as to like what's going on here. And it also brings up a lot of questions because Nathan Fillion in James Gunn movies tends to play like very much bit roles. Like if you've seen him in the MCU or like the Suicide Squad or anything. Which I don't know if they'll make a joke about that, how he was also the detachable kid or whatever, but now he's Guy Gardner, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But he usually plays bit roles, right, where he'll show up and he'll just be like a joke and then die or something. And I'm hoping that's not what happens with Guy Gardner, because even though I don't like Guy Gardner, I do really like Nathan Fillion, and I would love to see more of him. So hopefully he sticks around, but I don't know. This is really confusing to me. Not the casting itself. I guess maybe I would have cast him as Hal Jordan, because he has played Hal Jordan before, and Hal Jordan is the oldest Green Lantern. So yeah, I'm really confused by this. Then we've got Isabella Merced playing Hawkgirl. Now, you probably don't know this actress. I didn't, and I still don't feel like I do. But she's sort of a Nickelodeon girl. She was the star of Dora and the Lost City of Gold, the live-action Dora Explorer movie, which I have not seen. She was also in the Legends of Hidden Temple movie, and she was the little girl in Transformers The Last Knight, which is the really bad one that had Merlin in it or whatever. And so I did go, and just the first one of those movies that I found was the Legends of Hidden Temple movie, and I went and I watched that, and it really didn't help me figure out who this actress is at all, because she was like 15 in that, and she's now 22. So it's really probably not a great representation of like how good of an actress she is now, but she wasn't great in that, I'll be honest. But also it was Nickelodeon, and like they just don't, I don't know, I feel like they just don't push for like taking a bunch of different shots to get like the best take or whatever. Like they just don't care, because it's Nickelodeon. I think it was like straight to TV even, so who cares? So I don't know. I'm confused by this. The casting is really young. Her being 22, I think, is a strange pick. Because okay, so if you don't know Hawkgirl, let me explain. Because it is sort of a harder question to answer than you might think. Because the casting didn't give us Hawkgirl's name, because sometimes Hawkgirl is Shiera, and sometimes she's Kendra, and sometimes she's Shiera but spelt differently. And so we don't know which one of those specifically she's playing, but either way, she could either be an alien cop / soldier from the planet Thanagar, where there's a race of like militaristic bird people, or she could be a reincarnated Egyptian princess. If I had to guess, I would say that James Gunn will probably go the alien route, because that's by far the weirder one, I think. And he just always goes the weirdest route. So I feel like he's definitely going to go the alien direction on this one. Although it is definitely one of those origin stories where James Gunn could, if he wanted to, go in and change some things to make it make more sense. Because while people I think are attached to Hawkgirl as a character, I don't think the origin has any bearing on why people like that character. So you could definitely go back and change parts of it to make it make more sense, and I think that'd be fine. But yeah, I think, okay, so here's the thing. Hawkgirl is really cool. I like her a lot. I personally really prefer the reincarnation story. I think it's more unique, and I think that makes her a more interesting character for me personally. But it makes Hawkgirl being cast in this, I think of all the people we're going to talk about in the tail end of this, that character makes the most sense to be in this, because Hawkgirl is sort of a bigger character, but she doesn't necessarily need a role like a project of her own. She's kind of like Martian Manhunter in that way, where like you want her in the universe because she's a good character to have like in your back pocket to be able to use in different situations. But I really don't foresee anybody ever making a Hawkgirl movie. Although he's making an Authority movie, so I don't know. Anything's possible, I guess. So yeah, I totally understand why this character would be introduced in this universe. I think the casting choice is really weird. I think it's really weird to make her super young, because like 22 is an adult, but it is young enough where you're like, I don't know if this person should be like fighting supervillains. Like this is questionable for sure. She's definitely going to end up being like the child of the group, and I even though I've gone and I've watched some of her work, I don't have any confidence in this actress, because the only thing that I was able to find of hers is when she was 15. And so I don't know if she's a good actress now. I know she does music videos now, which I guess is cool, but it doesn't help me know how good she's going to be in this role. So I really don't have a lot to say about this, except like I said when we were talking about Green Lantern, is this does bring into question Jon Stewart again, because in the Justice League animated series, Hawkgirl and Jon Stewart have sort of a relationship, and apparently, according to rumors, the Justice League animated series is sort of a big influence on James Gunn in all of this. And so, does this casting mean that also Jon Stewart will be on the younger end? That he'll be like probably the newest member of the Green Lantern Corps, which would kind of make sense if he's like an intern, sort of like a new recruit following Hal around in the Lantern show. Like that could make sense. But he's also supposed to be like a war vet, so I don't know how all that's going to work out. I don't know. I'm very confused. Again, I think that this adds a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and of course, because of the writer's strike and the actor's strike, we're not going to get any of those answers anytime soon. So this one makes me a little bit nervous, because I love this character. I think this character deserves to be in this universe, or sooner rather than later. But the casting itself has me confused. I'm sure she'll do fine. Like, James Gunn is a really great caster, so if he chose her, I believe that she'll do a good job in it. But I cannot say that with any real confidence. And then we have Eddie Gathegi playing Mr. Terrific. So this is a really interesting one. You probably don't know who Eddie Gathegi is, because he hasn't been in a lot of like super popular things. Probably the most immediately recognizable role of his for most people is going to be that he played Darwin in X-Men First Class, who you'll remember as the guy who couldn't die, who then immediately died, even though that was literally his whole thing. So he wasn't really in the movie a lot, I guess. So he is pretty forgettable in that regard. But I think his best role that I've seen anyway is in Princess of the Row. This is one of the movies that I went and watched to get a better feel of who these people were. And he's amazing in it. So this is the story of a war veteran who's come back with really severe PTSD and a lot of just like mental disorders caused by being in really terrible situations in the war. And so he's basically non-functional, and he's being taken care of by his very young daughter, who's also phenomenal in the movie. I think she's played by Taylor Buck, I want to say. She's really good. She's really good too, and I hope that she goes on to do great things. But he has to be taken care of by her because he's unable to hold a job. So he's homeless, which is unfortunately the true story for a lot of real veterans in our country, which is a real shame. But he lives on Skid Row in LA, which is it's a really powerful story. It's very much like more of an indie sort of art piece. So if you do need to be in the right mindset to watch it, because it's going to hurt you emotionally. Like, it's very sad. There's not a lot of happy things that happen in this movie, but it is phenomenal, and I highly recommend it. Just make sure you're in the right mindset when you go see it. Anyway, he's playing Mr. Terrific, Michael Holt, who I don't think is a particularly well-known character, and in my opinion, not a particularly interesting character, unfortunately. He has a really standard origin. Basically, he gets into a fight with his pregnant wife, and she leaves and gets into a car accident. Basically, she goes off and gets fridged so that he can become a superhero, which is just the stupidest. I hate that origin story in particular, and I hope they change that in this movie. Or just don't mention it at all would be another acceptable answer, I guess. But he out Mary Sue's Batman. It's really crazy, actually. He's just good at everything. He is a genius level intellect. He is a billionaire CEO. He has an eidetic memory, which means he never forgets anything ever. So if he like sees someone type a password or like anything, he remembers everything all the time forever. He's got 14 PhDs in like chemistry, physics, poli-sci, law, engineering, medicine, psychology, and on and on and on. He's an Olympic gold medal decathlete. He's a master of 6 different martial arts. He's in peak human condition. He's got these T-spheres that he's invented, which are basically just mystery metallic balls that he can stick on anything, and they'll just do literally whatever the writer says they can do in that issue. It's just broken, really. Like, they can hack into the Pentagon, but also help him fly, but also shoot lasers, but also like literally anything. They can be anything. He can also speak basically any language. And in the DC universe, he invented the meatless hamburger. So he's just like the biggest Mary Sue that has ever Mary Sued anywhere. And the biggest difference between him and Batman in that regard is that Batman had to disappear from the Earth for several years and go and train to become good at those things. Whereas Mr. Terrific's entire thing is he is just naturally great at everything. Like, he's just really good at everything by nature, which is really boring. And I hope that they change that. I don't know. Mr. Terrific is really boring, is what I'm saying. In the comics, he just kind of sucks. But I think James Gunn will be able to do something with him. James Gunn has a history of taking characters who are not particularly interesting and making them, household names. Look at the Guardians. So I think that he'll be able to do something great with it. And Eddie Gathegi is an amazing actor, as I've just found out. So I think that between the two of them, they're really going to be able to change my mind on this character. And he has a really cool look, like style-wise, like aesthetically, great-looking character. So honestly, I think if they can just make him more interesting in terms of like his backstory and his powers and stuff, I think he can be really popular, and that does have me excited. So I'm hoping that they do that. And last but certainly not least, we have Anthony Carrigan playing Metamorpho. This is by far, I think, the weirdest choice of character to add to this, but I'm actually kind of excited about it. When James Gunn was about to announce his like slate of DC Universe projects like a couple months back, I actually made a joke on Twitter to a friend of mine that because James Gunn loves his like weird, outlandish characters, that he was going to use Metamorpho, and I was not expecting for that to be A, true, and B, to happen in the actual first round of casting that we got for this new universe. Like, that's insane. That's genuinely insane, but I'm kind of excited for it. Anthony Carrigan, if you don't know, he was in the Gotham TV show, the really bad Gotham TV show. He played Victor Zsasz, and I want to be fair to him because I think he did a really good job with the material he was given, but the material he was given was awful. As was most of the material in that show. But I think he did a good job with it. He is one of the more memorable and fun parts of that show, so I want to give him the credit for that. But also, I don't need to, because the other show that he's known for is he played NoHo Hank in Barry, a show that I very much need to get around to watching. And he was apparently nominated for an Emmy in it. So, like, clearly he knows what he's doing. And he's really attached to this character. I actually found an article where he was talking to the Hollywood Reporter, and he said this. Following his Emmy nomination, Carrigan, who has alopecia, explained that he had Metamorpho on his radar. Before getting the role, quote, "I like comic books, but I'm not a diehard. But I did, when all my hair fell out, go through a kind of pantheon of all these bald superheroes and supervillains and made note of all of them." Carrigan said, "I remember seeing Metamorpho, and I think he had like a giant hammer for a hand, and I was like, that guy's badass." Noted. We'll store that one away. Kerrigan went on to say that playing the character is meaningful. As a member of the alopecia community, this character, from what I've learned of the source material, he didn't like the way he looked, and I can relate to that. The actor added, when he got his powers, he thought it was a curse. That's something I really felt as well. In my case, I turned it around and saw it as a blessing, so I'm excited to bring that to the table with this character. So it's a really weird character and definitely not one I was expecting to see, but I'm really glad that they found an extremely talented actor who, well before he had any idea that this character was ever going to be cast, because that Emmy nomination was so long ago before that I don't even think he would have known that James Gunn was taking control of the DCU. There was absolutely no way that he was like, I'm going to play Metamorpho someday. But to find an actor who genuinely had on his radar that he wanted to play Metamorpho is insane. And so I think this is phenomenal casting. You're not going to find another person who years ago was like, yeah, I would love to play this character no one's heard of. I think that's phenomenal. Metamorpho is a weird character. He has a very strange origin story. So Metamorpho is Rex Mason. He's like this gun for hire / adventurer, kind of a slightly more dastardly Indiana Jones type. And he was hired by Simon Stagg, who's like a discount Lex Luthor. Like, he's one of those just CEO villains. You might know him from the Arkham Knight video game. He's the crappy old man who was like, I think he got kidnapped and he was like on one of the blimps. He had something to do with the storm kill or whatever that weird machine was called. It doesn't matter. He was in that. You might know that character from that. But he was hired by Simon Stagg to go find the Orb of Ra, just the most comic book sounding thing of all time. But he was betrayed by a guy who looks like a caveman and left to die near a radioactive meteor that basically irradiated him until he turned into the Element Man Metamorpho, that is just the most comic book ass origin story of all time. Like, it's kind of fun, but in a really stupid way. So he has the powers of element transformation. His whole thing is that he can turn parts of his body, or his whole body if he wants, into, I think, any element, including sometimes kryptonite. So he could be very valuable in this story in particular. And he can shapeshift, not into people. He's not Clayface, but he can like turn his arm into like steel and then shape that steel into a pickaxe or hammer or whatever. Or he can turn his entire body into a gas and then fly. So he is a weirdly super versatile character in terms of just like skill set. But his big downfall is that he can be controlled by whoever holds the Orb of Ra. Like, whoever has that can just command him, because that's, I don't know, some weird nonsense from his backstory. But anyway, and I think that might actually play into the plot of this. I could see Simon Stagg or maybe Lex Luthor having the Orb of Ra, and then using Metamorpho as like a goon, and especially because he can transform his body into kryptonite, be a really good villain for Superman to go up against in terms of just like actually making the fight interesting. Especially if he's somebody that Superman wants to save. I think that opens up a lot of really interesting narrative possibilities. And so I kind of hope that that's what's going on. I would love to see Anthony Kerrigan get like a really great role. I think he deserves it after putting in all that slum work as Zaz. But he's a lot of fun. Anyway, I'm really interested in this character coming into this universe because it's such a weird pull. Right? It's such a weird pull to put this character into a movie, especially literally the first movie of this universe. But it's not a bad one. And it's definitely a James Gunn-ass character. James Gunn loves his weirdos. He loves his outsiders. And Metamorpho was actually on a team called The Outsiders. So like it lines up perfectly. And honestly, if James Gunn doesn't bring Metamorpho to the big screen, literally who else would? You know what I mean? Like, no one else is going to do that. That is only James Gunn. And so I'm really excited to see this happen. I think they found the perfect casting for it. I hope that they use him in an interesting way. I hope they use all these characters in an interesting way. But this is weirdly one of the ones that I'm most interested in, even though that sounds probably ridiculous. I'm really excited for it. My only negative would be that because his powers are really weird It's probably going to be CGI, and I hope that they can make that not look terrible. We've seen a lot of examples of really bad CGI lately. Looking at you, The Flash. So hopefully they can make that work. James Gunn, I know that he will know this going into it. He's a very intelligent man, and he knows how to budget for his CG. And I really, really, I mean, look at Rocket Raccoon. That's one of the best CG characters I think we've ever seen in a movie. And so I think he knows what he's doing, and I have the utmost faith in him. But that would be my only real concern going into this. So I think this is going to be great. So all in all, I'm really excited about all this casting. I think all of the people that they cast for these roles are going to do a great job in them, except maybe Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl. And honestly, that's just because I don't know her. She'll probably do fine, but I just can't say that because I have no idea who she is. My only concern comes on the level of like the bigger picture, though. One of my big problems with the previous DCEU was that they made every single project into an ensemble piece and then did not handle those ensembles well. And so they just threw a bunch of characters at you in every single project and expected you to care about all of them. And we'd ended up not caring about almost any of them. And I'm really hoping that that's not going to be the case here, but it is starting to feel like it's going that way. So I don't know. This feels like way too many characters, like heroes, to be thrown in literally the first movie. And that does have me concerned that it's going to feel less like a Superman movie and more just, an ensemble piece. And James Gunn has been on Twitter saying that it will be a Superman movie, and I have the utmost faith in him. And even if it is an ensemble movie, we know that he does great ensemble movies between the Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy and all these other things. So I do specifically really trust him to make it a great movie, even if it is that. But it's just that that's not something that I want, if that makes sense. But even if it is good, this universe is really shaping up to be just really confusing, and I'm not loving that. Because we already had the existing problem of like some things are not canon anymore and other things are, because like we're keeping Viola Davis as Waller and like probably Peacemaker, although that's still unclear too. And then like maybe Blue Beetle will be a part of it, but because he said it would be the first DCU character, but it's before the new movies, like that was announced before he took over, so I don't know how that's going to work out. And then like Aquaman is still after that, and surely Aquaman's not going to be part of the new DCU, or like God, I hope it's not, because so like what is and is not canon is already really confusing and not been made clear on any level, which they really, really need to go in and fix as soon as possible. As soon as these strikes are over, I need James Gunn to come out on stage or on some video or something and break down almost literally point by point what is still canon, what matters, and what doesn't. And I don't think he's going to do that, but that's what I need. And I don't know, because of all that confusion and then throwing in all these other characters here and like the weird age range between them and a bunch of stuff like that, and some of the things we've heard about like the age gap between Superman and Batman, where like Batman's already going to have Damian, so he's probably going to be older too. It just makes a lot of things feel really messy. Like it feels like this is not going to come together into a particularly great cohesive universe. But hopefully all the projects individually will still be great, and that honestly, if that's the case, that'll be good enough for me. I don't need all these things to cross over constantly. It's actually one of the things that's been annoying me about the MCU lately is that like everything feels like it only exists to set up the next thing, and it doesn't feel like they're telling a story particularly well in the individual project. And if we get the exact opposite of that, where it's the individual project is great but it doesn't do a great job setting up like future things, honestly, I think that would probably be better. I would prefer if we could get both, but if that's not something we can get, I think I would prefer the individual projects being good. And like based on what we've been hearing, there's a lot of positive buzz around the projects and the people who are making them for the new DCU, so I think that might be the case. I don't know. I'm really excited about it. There's a lot of these projects coming up that I am really excited about. I'm really excited to see Metamorpho in a movie for some reason, and all these castings are phenomenal. And so I have a lot of hope for this, but I also have a lot of concern. And so I have the absolute most mixed emotion possible going into this, where I do think it'll be good and I'm really excited for it, but also I
I've been saying this the whole time. I just don't see the vision. I don't understand where he's going with it. And I know that James Gunn can do amazing movies, but it hasn't been proven if he can make a universe. And to be fair, very few people have ever had to do that or ever attempted to do that, really. So hopefully he can. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments. Like, do you see the vision of this? Do you love this casting? Do you think that this universe makes sense? Can you see the connecting threads here that I don't see? Because honestly, I would love to hear your opinions on that, because I'm very mixed on it. But yeah, if you like this content, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're getting really close to being able to actually monetize this channel, and once that happens, I'll be able to spend a lot more time on this channel because it'll just make more financial sense for me, because right now I have to basically pull overtime at work like almost every week whenever it's possible, because it's just like, everything's really expensive right now. But yeah, so if you could subscribe to the channel, share with a friend if you like this, just help me hit those numbers. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you around.